Are words meaningful and letters meaningless? And so, how far has human understanding of the dimensions of existence come? Welcome everyone to today's episode. I am in this episode interested to wonder about where reality's meaning arises, and in some sense what kind of puzzle of a lifetime or puzzle of an existence the human being finds itself in. I would say that when we look at our species, we notice a physical creature, and then we're considering this physical creature's behavior starting from just pure animalism, as if all the animals, all the species, if they had the sophistication of, let's say, the brain of the chimp, they might be building skyscrapers, That means, to me, it's very fascinating. Excuse me. To me, it's very fascinating how only one species, again, has become victorious in the game of intelligence on this planet, and one of the limited species that has that has fingers. Sometimes I wonder if birds became conscious like humans. In some sense, they wouldn't have the grip for civilization. I look at the world story, and reality is a story, believe it or not. I look at it that an unconscious animal that was unconscious to itself and the world at first, it became conscious, you can say, of a self, of a sense of self. And so a subjective dimension began emerging in the psychology of the creature. I personally, in my school of thought, call this the subjective evolution. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is that right now we find the human being, or I could say that because the human being starts from an unconscious activity and then becomes conscious, it's like from a state of confusion, which is just pure emergence, we as the human species, through experience and consciousness of experience, change the confusion of our existential situation into experiential understanding. When a person understands something, they understand how it works. They understand the behavior of phenomena in the realm. And all phenomena has a conceptual position and a contextual position. That means me right now giving this talk, the concept is a human being in a giant unknown human being. That's the concept. And the context is an unknown world, So this took my attention to how something interesting is happening in the human being's attempt to go from a state of confusion into a state of clarity and understanding, in order to go into a state of at least conscious ideological clarity or conscious archetypal clarity. There was a point where in the development of language, the letters didn't mean anything. That means language is kind of like, imagine instead of the alphabet, just like the letter A means the letter A, we have the color blue just being the color blue, And so it's as if a certain set of symbols without any meaning, and as these symbols are connected, they create meaning. That means if somebody says, what does the letter A mean? You know, people are like, yeah, I don't know, man, it doesn't mean anything, it's just the letter A. And if you ask, what does the word apple mean? Suddenly it leads to an image. So if we could somehow treat language like reality, letters are like the atomic level of realism, and you see that the atom doesn't have the human personality at its level, right? So pretty much human beings, our intelligence is raised to a point where we have made technologies and engaged in various methodologies which have led to the technologies. And so the human being, through its technology, scans the reality at different dimensions of existential relationship. That means it's as if a person, you know, may see electrons circling around the proton and the neutron, and the person may suddenly animate where the electrons are like people and the proton and neutron are like you know, a couple where people are jealous of, for example, you know. I'm simply trying to point out that as we look at the meaning of life, it's a dynamic character in a story. This character wonders about the basic level of things, and there is no story. So the fact that we are individuals, individualism, that is conditional to our conscious awareness so far. That means imagine imagine a time traveler from, let's say, to 2021. Let's say somebody tomorrow made a time machine, and let's say we use this time machine and we go back to a very early point in civilization where they haven't learned language yet, and we try speaking to those let's say primitive human beings. And they will not understand a single thing we're saying. That means meaning is something where symbolically you accept its first principles and then it arises automatically. That means we accept like letters, and then we accept that these letters have a sound, and then when somebody says apple, for example, we see the image of the apple, or we see the word apple. You know, I feel that, I mean, I don't want to say I feel, but whenever the unknown variables increase more than the known variables, the person has no choice. To me, it has been a very strange process of emergence. The fact that something exists rather than nothing is a question on its own. The fact that we have translated existential behavior, that means the behavior of the whole universe, into laws. And these laws contain our psychology in a world where the reality of the world surpasses the laws, you know. That means humanity can never forget that we are on a rock in the middle of nowhere, creating interpretation of phenomena, right? And there's two dimensions to the human being, and we're living in such a funny time on this in this current era in 2021, where there are some people who they are more convinced of the outer realms being reality. There are some people more convinced of the inner realms being reality. And if you're convinced by the outer realms being reality, you become an object worshipper. If you consider the inner realms to be truth, you become a subject worshipper. And the only way for a human being to in some sense bypass the natural ignorance of its design, that what it finds it chooses to conclude as. I feel from 2000, it's 2021 right now, I think until we get to 2121, there will be psychological transformations and the emergence of collective individualism. So in my attempt to make sense of reality, what the person has access to is observance, which means movement and change. And then it's as if the mind is changing faster than the outer realms, and because it's changing faster than the outer realms, it can notice the outer realms. You know, there's a metaphor I sometimes use. I use it humorously, but I feel there's a serious dimension to it. I say that sometimes consciousness, as human beings wake up in the day and go back to sleep at night, it's as if like a dolphin jumping up and above the water's surface and back into the water, above the water's surface and back into the water. That means all of human understanding has been going through dualistic filters of consciousness and unconsciousness, and before the consciousness and unconsciousness, the absence of light to the cellular entity and the presence of light to the cellular entity. What that means is, I'm saying, whoever's listening, imagine all the historians, philosophers, and people on the planet who've had ideas on the planet. All their ideas were being filtered by the universal, by certain dualistic universals. This means the object-subject. This means the known and the unknown. This means the conscious and the unconscious. This means that which is in the light and that which is in the darkness. You know, and imagine you who were an individual who realized the world you see is just what's in light. Now imagine how much of the world is not being captured in light. That means the sun sends forth beams. And these beams technically should create, I don't know what the term is, episodic. They should create episodes of perception, but to us it is one constant. That means from the moment the person wakes up in the morning, they have the option of seeing themselves as one person throughout the day, or they have the option of having a new attitude to every moment they are living on that day. That means, imagine you're someone who talks to people for a living. And so imagine you're talking to an angry person. Imagine you're talking to a calm person. Imagine you're talking to a sad person. Imagine talking to a successful person. These are all different contexts where behaviorism readjusts itself in its display. You know, it's like this. Just like how we have an unconscious world, and in this unconscious, from this unconscious world, there came an unconscious self, a body. That means first it was just the world here. Then a creature's body emerged, but the creature's body did not know where it was, did not know what it was. I consider that the unconscious self. Then the unconscious self somehow became conscious of itself. Now Jacques Lacan speaks about a mirror effect. It's pretty much a reflective gaze. What that means is this creature that started from a first person point of view biological perspective noticed its shadow, or noticed other human beings, or noticed its reflection in ice, or notice its reflection in a pond. Something made the creature notice not only that it is physically separate from the world, but that as it is being physically separate, it can also be physically, non-physically separate to its own self. So we have gone into the conscious self. From the conscious self, we go to the conscious world, and the conscious world is hilarious because the unconscious self and the conscious world are non-dual states. But the conscious self is a dualistic state. That means I'm that person saying to the world, hey guys, our human psychology is a phase of the evolution of not a universe from nothing, but in some sense as if there was something, but this something had no idea it was being a thing. It at some point notices it's a thing, and now it's realizing before it was a thing there was an unknown state. You see, this is the strange thing where some yogis in ancient Vedic times, they would say life is a dream, and you know, that's not a simple statement to hear when somebody tells you life is a dream. Okay, I remember reading that in Vedic thought, in the Vedas, and I was shocked. It was literally, I wouldn't say it was an existential panic attack, but it was just for a moment like, what if what we are seeing and what we are treating as reality is not the ultimate reality? And then I thought about, okay, so what are the signs and what are the clues that this world of ours could be a sort of dream or a sort of simulation of non-meaning? That means it's as if you are treating the world as if it's a word, it has meaning, and then suddenly you zoom in and you see the letters don't mean anything. The letters are just symbols. And the laws of the universe are symbols of movement, I would say. You know, you cannot be a physical creature and not be fascinated by physics, you know? And there was a time in my life where I took the concept of mechanical engineering very seriously, to some degree. And then I came to realize that it is in some sense man's ignorance. We look at everything in nature and there is multiple positions of it. You look at, for example, trees, there's multiple trees. There isn't just one tree. You know, you look at the human being, there's multiple human beings. It's as if something in nature doesn't enter existential activity alone through its experience. So what that means is there's so many, so there's a multiplicity going on when it comes to existential phenomena. But when human beings think about their universe, we call it a universe. One, as if in one verse we have captured the meaning of reality, right? That's one thing where I was thinking, how is it that, you know, let's say Mr.Withinian thought differs from, let's say, theistic and atheistic thought of the modern age? And I will tell you how it's different. I noticed that religious ideology and secular ideology actually have one thing in common. They are not considering parallel, they're not considering multiple earths. They're considering one earth. As if the religious person is on one earth and wants to go to one heaven, you know. And the secular person is just in one universe that began from a very loud explosion. So you see, religion and religious thought, or the religious context, and the secular context of the physical universe opened by the scientific method. It's as if they're a singular world story. It's a singular world story. And you know, there's a type of metaphysics, I would say, where this metaphysics is considering a side dimension to the physics. And then there's a metaphysics that's considering that the physics is not physics. You see, that's when science returns to how it was a branch of philosophy, because the questions of reality are more than how our senses can justify them. So, what I'm trying to say is that if there's a chance it's a multiverse, and I looked this up, and kind of how in scientific circles you would say the explanation of the multiverse is that the multiverse hypothesis is a subset. It's a probability of a system, and there could be a probability where there is no multiverse. There could be a probability where there is just one universe. There's a probability that it was one universe, it became a multiverse, or a multiverse that became one universe. The world, when you realize how much its geometrical hidden design is vast, it shocks your mind, you know. When I was younger, my phone called. When I was younger, believe it or not, for the longest time in my childhood, I didn't have a story for the world. Life was just an experiential event. And then at some point there comes the need to consciously position ourselves. That means you can say a young child playing is equivalent to an unconscious exploration of self. And then you can say a conscious human being trying to survive in a cruel world, that is the conscious expression of self. You see, this world is like a program where we are being introduced to the multidimensional. And if you look at all the other species, the biggest difference that human beings have with all the other animals on this planet is that we see dimensions they don't, and this cannot be ignored. Human beings can fathom the point that there will come a point in the space-time continuum where they die. So many animals, they don't fathom their death. In hostile situations, the ecosystem kind of reveals their destiny, but in some sense, that I have yet to see a bird or a squirrel that is depressed. Animals, their emotions they're based on their environment. They don't have an additional memory system in another dimension to collect world imagery, right? As if the brain is not a photo album, the brain is a film archive. And when you realize all films are made of frames or made of images, you begin to see that it's as if we treat reality as an image, because it's dynamic, it will be meaningless. If we treat the world as dynamic when it's an image, it will become multidimensional. So I am saying that it's as if we are living in a universe that is an unknown verb, but we are surviving, and all of our species knowledge is on a sort of known noun. That means it's as if the world is a film, but our truths, we want it to be like photographs and language. In, I would say, metaphysical thought, and oftentimes in these episodes, something I read in yoga early on in my life, was that when it comes to a sort of strategy towards truth, at least through the yogic algorithm, I would say that it requires to be 50% practical, 50% philosophical. And let me tell you why. Because there's two dimensions where the human being can be mobile. Anybody can try an exercise right now. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, okay, for a moment just look at what you're doing with your eyes, and then close your eyes and imagine what you're doing. Imagine you doing the same thing. Let's say right now, if you have a cup of coffee in your hand, raise the cup of coffee in the air and then close your eyes and don't move your body, but imagine you're raising the cup in the air. You will immediately notice that our brains provide access to a side invisible dimension. Or I shouldn't say dimension, a side invisible space. It's as if the imagination is a private server, and in front of our eyes it's a public server. And the whole aim of life is the individual that is in their own private server to surpass the collisions of belief and disbelief, and in some sense pilot beyond the story that they tell themselves. Because let me tell you, there is something so strange going on this planet, that it's not that there is not only one truth, It's literally like we're on one world, but we're 8 billion versions. It's as if behind our eyes there's 8 billion types of Earth based on every person's past memories and experiences, and then there is one outer realm. In front of our eyes, it's just singular. Like this is it literally means in front of your eyes is a workstation, and behind your eyes, it is in some sense the type of work you bring into the space. We human beings have the concept of balance, and the only way the concept of balance makes sense if you're trying to keep two dimensions in sync. That means right now, language is being a dimension of reality. and in some sense, the physics where the language is linked to subjectively to the object is being a dimension of its own. And there is a witness of the object and subject that cannot be a object or subject. So here's a riddle, ladies and gentlemen. Even if you're someone who just tuned into this talk, this is a sort of existential riddle. What is it, or what can it even be, that it's like the moment you notice you're an object and the moment you notice a subject, what is that is noticing both of them? And it's neither. So what this means is, when it comes to human knowledge, when it comes to 8 billion physical creatures with multidimensional minds living in a singular reality, it's all about what you choose to import from the unconditional realms of abstraction, the inner realms. That means in the inner realms there's no limits. That means the only reason I'm able to talk about novelty is because the inner realms can notice what is happening now. And even manipulate that beyond it. That means our mind is like Photoshop, and a person can add layers, can take away layers, can make it blurry, can make it clear. It's an advanced technology, but it's a technology where the user and the technology are being the same moment. That means that moment when someone sits inside a car, imagine somebody who's never seen a car, and the car has, let's say, black windows. You can't see inside the car. Okay? Imagine an alien lands on Earth, and it's like not an intelligent alien, and this alien starts talking to someone's car in a traffic jam. And then the human being is like, what is this alien doing? Does this alien think that the intelligence that is moving the car is the car? And we see no. There's a driver in the car. Now, the whole question of metaphysics, the whole reason philosophers have been getting angry at immaterialists, have been getting angry at materialists, and materialists have been getting angry at immaterialists, is simply because we are considering, is there a driver or is there no driver? If there is a driver, additional dimensions, multiverse theory is going to win. If there is no driver, in some sense, and somebody can come and say, hey, Mr. Within, the human being is a sociological animal, it's a social animal. So it means that it's as if our free will, we may think it's just our free will, but it could be the subconscious reaction to various environments held in our vision. That means, imagine a podcaster that only talks about sunny days. And you are like, why does this podcaster talk about sunny days? And people see this podcaster is like, in Antarctica somewhere where the sun is barely, visible due to the storms and, circumstances. Human psychology is teleportation. The mind is a teleporting device in another dimension. That's a very good way I can say it. Every time sound enters our ears, the inner realms animates it. That means it's like when I say the word a blue glowing cube hovering in the air. How many people right now, there's 6 viewers right now, how many people could visualize that cube in their inner realms the moment I said it? We are 8 billion objects that are changing in the space-time continuum. And we are not 8 billion subjects. This is the fascinating part. A person experiences various versions of themselves, and the brain tries to hang on to the moment. It's as if the brain is a eternal technology. It has no sense of death, but the body is a temporary technology. And so this temporary technology is being driven, let us say, by some sort of eternal mystery. And so it's as if the person listens less to their instinctual desire, they will remember their multidimensional presence. And if they listen to their intuitive nostalgia, I would say, a sort of hidden desire, I will guarantee this. You know, it's a bold statement I'm going to make right now, but I will tell you there is probably 25% of the human population who has a nostalgia for the future. That means if there is 8 billion people on the planet, 2 billion people have a nostalgia for a future collective self that is attributeless. That means something we never thought. That thought is not a thought. I will tell you, when I wake up in the morning, in my humanized dimension, it's pretty much, you know, a regular protocol. But in my inner life, I will tell you, my inner life doesn't hold a limit to my outer life. That means it's as if, imagine you're a being where this whole time on the planet you have been a mind and a body. Okay, but you have been, imagine, conditioned in the world to think that you're just a body, and as a body you are pushed into fear psychology. The moment you're pushed into fear psychology, you have become the greatest obstacle for yourself. That means, I will tell you, I have in my youth I hated people. Now it doesn't really make sense to hate a species that can go extinct, but I will tell you, it's like fear can offend the soul. Like a person's own fear can offend them. And I will tell you that there's been moments in my life where a fear has come from the inner realms. I can usually tell. Fear of the outer realms, imagine you're walking in a park and you see a bear. So that's like an outer realm fear. Fear of the inner realms is when in the outer realms you may be good, but you feel a storm is happening in another dimension. You know, there has been times where I would say I have stepped out of my inner realms intentionally. That means there was a time where I had such an information overload. That means I was seeing too much geometry in my inner realms, and I just had to put my palm on my forehead and literally shift my attention to something in the outer realms. You know, the question comes for those who are not afraid of the future, because the only philosophers that will make it to the future will be ones who dare to look at it. That means if you're someone worshipping the past, the moment the paradigms, the karmic paradigm of the past design is finished, you will exit with the past. You know, there's a saying that I don't know how I knew this, but it was also confirmed to me in the Bhagavad Gita, that imagine a war starts. Imagine right now there's a war on the planet. Imagine if a war started, and this war was between everyone and everyone. That means it wasn't nations fighting with one another. Every human being was fighting with everyone, as if a sort of chaotic distrust in society. Okay? Now in global society. Now imagine at some, I would say, in a war where things are going towards extinction, if let's say there's an extinction approaching us, in some sense the innocent, the decent, and the playful will exit first. Let me tell you why. Because the energy is different. That means there isn't just an ideological karma. It's not what we say, what we think that it's important. The whole universe is an energetic event, as if like everything has energy and everything has an influence on its environment, and it's like a giant orchestra of forces in the universe sculpting reality. You know, there has been times, guys, I'll be honest, I have shouted at the sky, but to my inner sky. That means in the outer realms I haven't shouted. But in my inner realms, I have been like, universe, why have you brought my eyes here? And so that's when man realizes. It's literally, there was this show when I was a kid, I don't remember the name of it, but it's a theme in multiple warrior action-based shows where the warrior defeats all the bosses that are external to him, and the last enemy he has to defeat is himself. It's literally like a shadow version of himself that anything he does, the shadow self does too. And the only way the warrior can defeat that opponent if they stop fighting their own shadow. You stop fighting your chaotic self, or the dimensions within your psyche which have approached the chaos. And this doesn't mean you stop fighting by order. It's as if chaos and order are having a discussion, and people think, all right, let's go with order to tackle chaos. Sure, you know, that's modern society. But I will tell you, the advanced communicator steps out of the dualistic framework, accesses the void perception, the singular perception, and the infinite perception, then enters the dualistic scenario. That means right now, a person is thinking dualistically, am I a good person and am I a bad person? In the future, philosophers will be like, imagine emptiness, empty space was conscious. Could that space have morality? Do you know, could just sight in empty space have morality? Do you know, we think about if everybody was one being, what would right and wrong mean? Do you know, if we in some sense have this view, I mean, we are inside duality, we don't have to think about that, but let's say infinity, the archetype of infinity, if we thought right now, if you were an immortal being, would good and bad exist? You would see if nobody died, there would be no right or wrong. There would just be interruption in form. So, if words lead, let me say it like this. A letter is a meaningless symbol, is art, pretty much. Letters are art. Then, the letters join together, so multiple letters create a word, multiple words create a sentence, multiple sentences create a paragraph, multiple paragraphs create a book, and the book has an ending. Do you see? So right now we are human beings wondering what is this book of life, and realizing that the events in our life, if they were put under a sort of let's say abstract microscope, in some sense we would see smaller dimensions with a different geometry. That means some people are like, sure, there's a particle, let's call it an atom. We cut open this particle, and inside it we found 3 other particles. But here's the strange thing. When the concept of fractals exists, there is no inside and outside. That means we as individuals have divided the realm into the micro and macro, and even Plato said as above so below, but the above and below are one moment. Right? That means the gods and man in ancient mythology are one moment. As if it's like the person's like, yo, if the gods are beyond mankind, why are the gods looking at mankind? That means usually things go up, right? People look up, look towards realities that are more advanced than their own. But why are the gods looking at man? Right? And in Vedic mythology, there's 7 dimensions, and it's incredible, There's figures in Vedic mythology. There is, for example, Indra. Indra is known as the king of heaven, and in a sort of I don't know how to tell you the loka. I don't remember the exact name of the loka. Oh yeah, Indra loka. I forgot. Indra loka. This is the abode between the earth and the sun, which is in some sense the king, which is a heaven. That means in Vedic mythology, between the earth and the sun is the heaven where Indra is king. That means to me, I think Indra is just a galactic, I don't want to say overlord, but is probably a galactic leader. Because it's just archetype, right? It's archetype, and then archetypes that find themselves having more expression in multiple dimensions. Eventually, the greatest multidimensionality will be just a gigantic singularity. So that means human beings are existing in, at least from, you could say, Mr. Within's perspective, there is 4 worlds right now. There is a world where nothing has ever happened. There is a world where only one thing has ever happened. There is a world where 2 things happen simultaneously, and there is a world where all things are infinitely happening. These 4 dimensions. We are in one of them. That means I will pretty much say that probably people's inner realm, metaphysical, let's say, psycho-socio-cultural dimension, people are either communicating to nothing, to space. People are communicating to the whole universe, or as the whole universe, or people are communicating between a spectrum of chaos and order. Or everything has been infinitely communicated. That means there's a view that I have never given this talk. There's a possibility that I have always given this talk. There's a possibility that this talk is 2 talks, actually a chaotic one and an ordered one. And then there's a possibility that this talk is infinitely being given everywhere the moment I communicate. These are abstract probabilities. You know, the theoretical physicists, you know, shouted at the religious man, it's like, get out of the laboratory, you know, get out of my office, but then went to theorize the physics. You see, it's not that there is imagination and there is reality. It's that reality was imagined and imagination can be realized. Reality is imagined from the void. Who are we kidding? You know, we're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. If we were interstellar, then we could totally say reality wasn't imagined. There was an interference factor. That means imagine me giving this talk and a bird flies in front of me and suddenly I talk about flight. You know? So it's as if that bird would be an interference factor to my subjective realm. If right now, somebody, whoever's listening, if somebody asked you, who are you? Or let's say you ask yourself, who am I? You know? You would notice that that I is an I thought. It's a character in a world. That character in the world is the mind's standing, but it's kind of like the person's like, wait a minute, is the concept of God man-made? And the person becomes horrified. And then the person's like, wait a minute, is the concept of man man-made? The person becomes even more horrified. You know? So there is, you know, I would say nihilism is no joke. Nihilism is conscious non-existence. You see, the world is a story, and it's a story that can only have meaning if there's movement, if the character in the story in the world moves. That means, imagine you play a video game, and in this video game you the character customization and everything has been done, and you just find yourself in the first level of the video game, but your character doesn't move, as if you're not touching the keyboard or the mouse. When the character doesn't move, you can in no way say you have played the video game. That means you start a video game, the character's just in the map standing waiting for you to hold the controller. If you never move the character, even though you were inside a video game, you did not play it, right? Which could be another way of saying, even though we're alive, we're not living. And so the video game character is controlled off screen. And what if we realize human psychology is controlled off atmosphere? This whole time we're like remote control, technologies for dimensions that have surpassed visibility. Imagine in the future, you can move at the speed of light. That would mean shape-shifting, to be honest. That means if you can move faster than light, you can, in the middle of any shape in light, quickly go out of shape, which is a shape-shifting. The shape shifts into nothing. So I'm saying that there is a dimension to life where the world has no obligation to match our inner realms. A human being should be content with this dimension. I feel that in life a person shouldn't seek success as a goal of an object or a subject. I feel the person should immediately notice the unknown variables. That means if someone was just teleported into another civilization on another planet, you got to just quickly look and see what is familiar, what is unfamiliar, what are the unknown variables, what are the known variables, how much can you engage the known variables, and how much after engaging the known variables you're required to go back into the unknown. Sometimes I comfortably talk about existence because I know that it will, in some sense, the video game may turn off. Literally, it can turn off at any point. In the Islamic universe, there's a saying where they say God can take your breath at any moment. That means the creation archetype can go back to the creator archetype at any moment. When I heard the song of the advanced civilizations for the first time in my inner realms, for the first time the idea arose to me that, wait a minute, why aren't we advancing civilization? Do you know what I realized? I will share right now with the audience one of my most profoundest realizations on civilization. Civilization is, in some sense, a container let me see how I can say this. Pretty much, we are minds. We're considering that every person right now listening to me, most likely you're considering you have a mind. So this means we are a mind moving the body, okay? Whether there's a soul or not beyond the sensor dimension. So if we're considering we're a mind moving a body, we're building actually a civilization for biological entities and also for abstracto entities. And I thought about, okay, so in this lifetime, I'm just one person, and I was thinking, like, what can I do? I don't have the physical resources to build an advanced civilization, Even though if I had, I know what I would do with it. Do you know? But I'm a person who I don't have the physical resources to change the outer realms, but I realize that the only way we can change the inner realms is through speech, is through the effort of what is sitting silently behind our eyes to, in some sense, become the roar of the personality in the moment. Why else do we have an inner realm? It's as if the person looks at physical life and it's like, what's the point to see it? And what is the one seeing it? It's the inner life. That means the inner self is looking through the outer life, and the outer self is looking through the inner life. And so this bird of paradise is wondering how it needs to flap its wings in the void. All problems are just from bad piloting, either from a collective angle or an individual. So we have the opportunity to serve the body of civilization, or to serve its mind. And to serve its mind, that means in our inner realms, we should have built thousands of advanced civilizations before in our outer realms we have even one. That means the mind should lightning speed be running towards the future, you know? That means any human being that is not afraid of the future, you are the leader of humanity. All those who are trying to ignore the future, all those who are trying to hang on to the past as if it's a bunker that will protect you from the unknown. It is not. The unknown is the enlightenment of knowledge. You know, it's as if the known universe and the unknown universe have gifted man. And so the unknown dimensions of the known dimensions of the cosmos were like, all right, the human idea, we will gift you with a biological body that is temporary, but that will give you the most sophisticated access in perceiving your reality. You know, and so it's as if humanity was like, thank you, known universe, for this gift. Right? But then the unknown universe was like, I have a gift for you too. And the gift of the unknown universe was infinity. The gift of the known universe was the finite in the void. So emptiness is the greatest gift that existence can give you. And the greatest gift that I would say, the greatest gift that matter can give you is the void, and the greatest gift that space can give you is infinity. And you know, if thinking is an event of the mind, the act of thinking, it is in some sense the performance of energy in some space. That means there's going to be probably a branch of philosophers in the future who they will in some sense feel there has never been a philosopher, and it has been one field of intelligence. It's as if we are drops in the ocean or drops on a leaf. The drop on the leaf is like, yo, I'm alone, I'm going to evaporate, I'm going to die. The drop that realizes it's in the ocean cannot die. That means right now, our human brains are just providing an individual life's memory. But if a person can remember the witness within and its unconditional nature, you then get access to your universal memory, and universal memory is so bizarre that you cannot be human in it. That means universal memory happens when you have completed all your human memories in some sense. That means you have fulfilled the angles of the human mind. Not the human mind, the human idea. My attention has come to the chat section. Welcome, everyone. Feel free to ask a question and in brackets write the context of your comment before you write the comment, or I won't know what you're talking about. I'll show an example in the chat section what I mean. So if somebody has a question, they can write okay, so guys, I'm in the chat section. I'm writing an example of how people can share their comments, because I just talk about various subjects and I go forth. Sometimes in the chat section, I have no idea what people are responding to. So if you in brackets write. Okay, anyways. So, we are characters in a story. As characters in a story, we're considering an unknown intelligence. We call it mind moving the story. Because we have character customization, literally, that means we can we can select our attitude to the moment. This means we are not subjects. We can control subjects though. Just like how a person can move a car, drive a car, the attention behind your eyes can pilot subjects. But it is not the subject. That means I am conscious. Everything I say, the dimensions of reality surpass it because there's a direct experience which cannot be worded. People or any conscious creature in the realm should not fear the dimensions of their world or they will not understand it. That means every person should throw the idea and the concept of fear or the concept of being afraid out. That means there was I believe it was Napoleon Bonaparte where he said impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. So you see, there's certain ideas that the person must, in some sense, kind of salute and say goodbye to and send the idea on its way. Fear is just going to translate. Right now, the dictionary may say fear is like certain physiological responses to a sort of psychological state. But I would say fear is just an opportunity to understand a different intensity of reality. Sorry guys, that was an unavoidable phone call. So anyways, I was saying fear is an opportunity for understanding of different intensities of reality, honestly through the perspective of a designer. And once the person sees that all meaning is geometry moving in the space-time continuum, we will kind of realize that why mathematics can depict reality in ways that nothing else can, you know. And of course, I will tell you that I am not a sort of traditional advocate of mathematics in the sense that, to me, geometry is not a branch of mathematics. Mathematics is a branch of geometry, you know. You know, I'm that person who got offended when I saw that geometry is being classified under mathematics, you know. Because so much of everything in life is just design based. That means this is why I have been so keen on studying language and understanding that how much of the day, when a person wakes up to the moment they sleep, how much of the day is an inner realm linguistic simulation, and how much of it is an elemental engagement with the world, you know. And I will tell you, if a person fears to see the truth of their realm, they will fear their nature, their true nature. There will come an apocalypse in the educational system. I think I'm the only person on the planet who has shared this idea. The reason I say an apocalypse, not because the economical sector has possessed the educational system, but because we will realize the hollowness of language, and then we will realize the value of knowledge was never teaching the future generations the past. The value of knowledge was to, in some sense, only sharing the questions of the past, and so the children of the future generations can become the answer to them. Do you know? That means if let's say a person in talking, they provide a question and then they provide an answer, and now I'm imagining, okay, I don't have kids, but I'm saying, okay, imagine I have a child, and this child is like, oh my God, you know, I'm going to do exactly what my father did. I would be in some sense disappointed in that child, you know. Because the question is so much vaster than the answer. Questions are like cracks in the sky, you know, and answers are like a sort of lockdown into an image. Beyond language, what are the possibilities? Let's say you're someone who's like, okay, Mr. Within, I can see how objects are temporary, and I can see how thoughts come and go throughout the day, and our perception as human beings changes both internally and externally. Now, the next thing would be, if we go beyond the language threshold, what is the expectation before we enter the language threshold? Imagine the language threshold, this concept I've coined. Is a point where it's like a portal, and the moment you go in the portal, you cannot relate to the world you were in before. So the language threshold is in some sense how the universe becomes conscious. That means we're here thinking it's just individual civilizations, but it's in some sense just like drops in rain. Rain. It's kind of like a sort of cycle of the weather, I would say. So what that means is, like, individual drops fall, they become rivers. The rivers go to the ocean, you know. And so it's as if there is a separate physical way where reality animates. Then there is collectivehood, collective rhythms of, for example, humanity is a very conscious collective rhythm in the universe. So. An evolution of individual consciousness into collective awareness. And awareness means it's unconditional. That means being just human being and building an advanced civilization is just the phase. It's as if we thought there were only seasons, on Earth. There's seasons to the whole universe. And I would say instead of winter, spring, summer, fall, I would say in some sense it would be the zero dimension, the one dimension, the two dimension, and the infinite dimension. Seasons of being. Right now we can say we are in the season of duality. The next coming season, infinity. The next coming season after infinity is the void. After the void is the singular. It's as if the universe is drawing a painting, but it is endlessly trying to, it's as if evolution is the universe's attempt at perfection. Or it's a universal intent towards perfection. So, beyond the language threshold, 2021, let me see. Let's say human beings have this 200-year plan that every human being is being told on Earth, okay, prepare a consequence to your life for like 200 years. What that means is like the person's body can live in some sense, let's say 100 years, just for the sake of saying it. Like let's say a body lives 100 years. And then we would say your mind's influence in the world should stretch beyond 200 years. And the only way this can happen is if the person's lifetime contributes to a discovery in the inner realms and contributes to an invention in the outer realms. And when I say invention, that means just an introduction of things. That means a person gets an idea, let's say for an invention, and what's the first thing you do? You draw it out. After you draw it out, what's the next thing you do in manifesting the idea? You go and find resources, and then what's the next thing you do? You organize the resources, and then at some point Edison was like, yo, did I just create a light bulb right now? Imagine an advanced civilization where every human being at the end of their lifetime presented the advanced civilization with their great work, as if their whole lifetime has had a value in how their eyes are unique in accordance to their DNA. That means it's as if the responsibility of the DNA is to share it in the inner realms to the outer realms. Even if we were to look at worldhood, I mean, what are the options, right? The options are like either there's a completely just subjective universe, either there is a subjective object, or there is an objective subject, and then there is a complete reality that is a pure object. And so the reality that is just pure objectivism, it's as if like a non-intelligent context to phenomena. The realm that is the objective subject, this is the current way where this is kind of like the secular norm. And then the subjective object is like the spiritual person in society. And the realm that is pure subjectiveness, philosophically, the solipsist is getting close to this. And in the outer realms, the mystic is living in like that. It's kind of like death is when life takes everything you have. It's like death is that kind of suggestion of an idea. And so it's as if before the death takes away everything you have. Your whole life you have been giving everything you've had. And so the moment as if death comes to take what the person has, the person doesn't have anything. Because the point of it is that it's just energy. It's like light is entering our eyes, and the whole species is living in an archetypal story with a certain ethos. A realm just filled with objects, that is a realm of individualism. The realm where their object, it's as if the objective subject, I miswrote the order. So the order should be the subject, the objective subject, the subjective object, then the object. So there's a possibility of being an individual, there's a possibility of being a collective individual, then there's the possibility of the individual collective, and then there's just the collective. Four probabilities of how intelligence can animate. That means as long as we think we're objects, it's codependent with the subject. That means if we think we're a body, we're in the dualistic simulation. If we think we're a mind, and we're in the dualistic simulation. If a person believes there is God, that's still a dualistic simulation. It's like man and God. You know, it's kind of like saying the human being is nothing, or the human being is something in nothing, or the human being is nothing in something, or the human being is just something. The romance of the mind with the dimensions of its perception. I would say there is nothing more divine than fascination. Fascination is the miracle. No, I would say it's the smartest attitude for a species to have to its future. It's as if the person wakes up, and someone tells them, "Hey, why did you wake up today?" And the person says, just to see in what other way the world can move in my eyes. I mean, I don't know anyone who can hate a new experience, because after any new experience, it just becomes feedback, And especially when the world has a multidimensional context, sometimes I wonder, am I talking to an object, a subject? It's as if, what are people anyways? We're all like biological antennas, and the signal updates both based on an outer line of information and an inner line of information. Jeff in the chat section asks the question, do you feel sin on your heart when you do wrong? I would say there was a time where I thought every wrong has to be judged by my past sense of righteousness. But I will tell you, for me, it's not that like there is sin or just a state of absence of sin. To me, it's a probability simulation. So that means for me, when I see sin, that's an acted upon inefficient probability that the mind generated. To me, I'll be honest, for me it's just inefficient and efficient in the outer realms. In the inner realms, my morality is not just limited to human perception. That means my morality is to the degree of a universal view. What that means is, like, when you care for the species' future, you don't want to see the inefficiency of civilization. So this game of right or wrong, like Leo Tolstoy spoke about this, and he said that in the Russo-Japanese War, the Japanese emperor is like, the Russian Tsar is like, God is on our side, we're gonna win this war. And the Japanese leader was in some sense also, the universe is on our side, we're gonna win this war. So everybody has been telling themselves a story of what is absolute righteousness. The mind, the inner, if I judge the world based on my inner realms, in some sense, it's as if I have limited the world to the narrow view that only I had. But I do notice inefficiency. I would say I don't have this artificial view of sin or goodness. I have this life sensitivity where I just see what is happening. That means if I say something that is not even rude, but I see that it like, you can notice how energy levels of people rise and fall, and you can even notice how certain attitudes bring rises and falls in your own energy, right? And so it's as if, of course, you cannot live in society without a sense of morality, Jeff. I will tell you, and it's not that there is I would say sin is the lesser self's victory. And believe it or not, I don't think there's any human being that is like, believe it or not, angel. Because if we were an angel, we wouldn't be here. Do you know what I mean? So in some sense, the nature of man is a stumbling creature. Our ancestors were wild animals in the forest. You want to talk about sin? Do you know? The more you go back in history, the more people just were insecure and killed each other on the spot. Now that whole thing has come to an inner level after the concrete jungle's development, right? And so imagine somebody says there is a sin. What is the judgment? What is the judgment? How do you respond to the sin? Do you in some sense throw the person into hell because they made a sin? Or do you wonder about what other ways that human intelligence can function, right? For me, I have, what it is? It's as if the human species, the human, natural, biological human, has been bullied by ideologies. The attention that is found in the biological human being, okay? It has been bullied into, I would say, inner realm fixations of image. I was listening to this fascinating lecture by Jordan Peterson. I would say anybody who wants to understand morality, it's like Jordan Peterson's lectures are incredible. His approach to that idea. It's a world where there are chaotic factors and ordered factors, and if you get defined by the chaos, you won't feel you deserve the better order. If you get defined by the order, anytime chaos happens, you suffer. So as if the options of human psychology in this modern era of ours is either you still play the good and bad game, or you try to have the game of multidimensional understanding. Just like an object can be looked at from different angles, so can a human being. But we don't treat human beings like that in society. We have ignored their multidimensionality. It's as if sometimes I think as if what's missing from the world is multidimensional perception rights. And it's the only people to blame are, believe it or not, how the continental philosophers lost the war to the analytical philosophers. And analytical philosophers were in some sense, you can say the scientific method, you can say it's the scientific method's attempt to devour psychology. So analytical philosophers are like a Trojan horse, And of course, I'm saying this because I have my own personal opinions on this, That's when emotions come in, The more something is universal, the less our emotions matter in relation to the idea. The more something is personal, the more our emotions are its motivation, In some religious texts, it is suggested that God doesn't need people to preach its truth. that God doesn't need, in some sense, to be, let me tell you, it's as if God is already everywhere. It is man who, in the theological lens, has forgotten his connection with his Creator. And when you understand that connection with your Creator, if you still have the idea of sin, that means you haven't understood it. Because it is everywhere. You see, it's as if the person's like, wait a minute, is the soul the extension of God? And if everybody has a soul, does that mean God is everybody's movement? And if you're a person who believes in the divine will, then it's as if the sword and shield have been put down. That means if you truly believe in God, then it's as if God is in the room first before you. If God is in the room here before you, your personality cannot have a judgment on God. You see, this is why religion is an experience at the end of that tunnel. I would say it's like there is religious ideology, but religion is an experience. Okay. So Jeff brings up a very interesting point. He says, what about the battle within? Think negative thought. You have those negative thoughts you have that doesn't come from you. That's evil. No. Let me ask you, where does the concept of evil come from? How do you know the concept, the idea that there's evil people in the world is not an evil idea that has just come to you? You see, in theological sense, and in at least one, you can say one man's observation, I have seen that if you were to see religion not literal, just for the sake of, let's say you're a philosopher and you're like, what could religion metaphorically mean? Do you know? And I would say metaphorically, the fallen angel archetype, the concept of the devil, which in religious ideas the devil's making you do bad things, right? That is duality. The devil is the idea of duality. God is the idea of singularity. And people in duality are having opinions on the singularity, and based on those opinions, judging the outer realms with it. That means I'm telling you, what if there was no good and evil? It was just creatures that presented themselves in those contexts. That means it's as if it's like, when did we start giving a personality to energy? When did this happen, It's as if there's this idea in theology that God is the ultimate judge, but man is judging instead of God. Man is trying to do God's work, and God's like, hey buddy, I'm right here, So what I mean is that the singular is not in the location. The dual is like an onion layer inside a greater singularity. I will tell you that I think what is cruel is ignorance of the other person's inner realm. That means, imagine, I'll give you an example. Okay, so Jeff, in the chat section, think of this example I'm going to give and try to comment on this. I remember seeing a video on YouTube where it's this ATM, and there's this very beautiful girl at the ATM waiting for her turn. Behind her there's a guy, and behind that guy there's another guy. Now the guy at the end of the line is a bit mischievous and he in some sense slaps the beautiful girls behind, and then the guy at the end of the line, and the beautiful girl with utter anger turns around and slaps the guy behind him, and the third guy at the end of the line laughs. Okay. Now, Jeff, tell me, what is that lady's sin, and whose sin is it? That means, do we have sins, or is all of this Adam's sin from a theological lens? That means in Christianity, I have heard that there's this idea that Christ died for our sins, but all of our sins are Adam's sin, the first man archetype in theology. So the idea is that I would say, at least from a religious context, if the person is considering the world is God's creation and God is running the world, you know, and the religious person is like an employee of this great employer of the universe, it's as if the employee shouldn't act like the employer, or the employer's like, buddy, you think this is your company? You know? You know? So in some sense, I am a person who, I would say, that truth is too true before it can be untrue. For me, it's all about, in the outer realms, collective efficiency; in the inner realms, individual efficiency. You know, every person is living in a story of the world. Is living in a story of the world that nobody else can see. And if we are to judge the unknown, that is the biggest sin, you know. That means, do you know how many people with the through the idea of, like, literally in Spain there was the Spanish Inquisition, and the Spanish Inquisition used heresy as a political tactic of power, right? This can't be ignored. That means when we say sin, that person made a sin, that is literally like denying the creation of God, its creative dimensions, you know. Now the idea is that in the social context, I mean, it's like we are living in 2021. Religion was a 6th century, let's say, lift-off platform of the psyche. I would say, why limit your psychology to good and bad? Why not see infinite dimensions to good, infinite dimensions of bad? Why not see various ratios of percentage in how good a person can be, how bad a person can be? Do you know? And why not realize that the whole yin-yang symbol is in one damn circle? One damn blessed circle. It is too easy to brand the outer realms and forget that there is an unknown pilot behind the eyes of the biological body, you know. And I will tell you, until the person understands the unknown, most likely their psychology, through an extremist concluding. So what I mean by that is, like, we're a creature that at different energy levels has a different preference of its own attitude. You know, for me, in the religious mentality, everything is the creation of God, but, you know, people fight over it. Everything is God literally moving, but people fight over creation. And it's as if the first mistake had to be made, you know, really. We are reaching an era where I feel we're reaching the end of the era. I mean, I declared it actually. In 2020, I declared the era of advanced communication. That means from 2020 onwards, there is awareness beyond subjective fixation. It's a universal truth. And if the person doesn't want a universal truth, then you will hold the biggest hammer of judgment, you know. It's as if, imagine someone, you know, from like an urban environment goes into a primitive tribe in the Amazons, a primitive savage tribe where they, still, like very primitive hunter-gatherer tribe. And imagine you go into a primitive tribe and you're like, hey guys, start using forks and forks and spoons, and you're like, well, wait a minute, why is everybody in the tribe holding their spear in their So you see, as Galileo says, you cannot teach anyone anything. You can just make them realize it from within. And there's no point of a person making a sin and not updating afterwards. Because then it's as if they haven't seen the inefficiency. Because think of it this way. Imagine we say good behavior is more efficient than bad behavior, or bad behavior is more inefficient than good behavior. And so it's as if anytime we see somebody commit a sin, it's as if they are slowing down the progress of the advanced civilization. The idea is, it's like the species has become cosmically street smart. That means we're shifting from I would say personalized identity into global archetypes. The era of the globally responsible human being. Because it's a rock in the middle of nowhere. Everything else is the art, on the face of man. Sorry guys, this was on mute and I was just firing away. Language does have momentum. I would say that if a person wonders about, like, here's the thing, when a person can wake up every day and have a singular belief on their future, but if you look at your past, on so many different days, a person's past feels different to them. I've had days where I felt I've been alive for like endless time. You know what I mean? I've had days where I felt I've been alive just for such a little time, as if, why is life so short? Do you see, the past is like how the emotions in some sense rehold whatever was whatever the attention of yesterday was on. Guys, I mentioned this in the talks often. The Buddha at the end of the Lotus Sutra, there's two stories about kind of Buddha that I would share. One is like in the Lotus Sutra, where the Buddha at the end of his life finds himself in a hysteria. His disciples are like, why Buddha, why now are you freaking out? And Buddha's like, I have been wrong. And all his disciples are like, holy shit, Buddha was wrong? And Buddha says, I was wrong. We were all enlightened from the beginning. The universe is enlightened. The world is enlightened. The world is in one light. The world is the light in our eyes. So that's a view the Buddha had, as if the universe is already at its maximum greatness. It's man who is off to it. And then there's another story of Buddha where somebody says, hey Buddha, after you die, are there going to be other Buddhas? And the Buddha says no. And the person's like, why? And the Buddha says, because Buddhism would have spread out throughout the land to such a degree that everybody would have access to their Buddhic nature. There needs to be no more messenger. There needs to be no messenger of the inner realms. That means it's as if this is why I was like, I chose the name Mr.Within, you know? Because all that I'm doing is throwing mirrors. I'm that person in history throwing mirrors at a species, you know? Our eyes open in a realm, in a space, where in that space there's dimensions. The biological eyes give access to color, a color spectrum of reality. They give access to a geometry. That means right now I'm looking at the buildings in front of me and I could totally see there's just a level of just lines. All that I'm seeing that building is to me is lines, and then there is color between the lines, you know? And then there is depth and dimensions of space. So that means a world is like geometry plus color plus space, all in some sort of conscious moment. And nature is peaceful. I will tell you, this is the most important thing. A wise man once said, treat life as your family. Everything that is alive, you know? Forget the ideological frameworks that go in the mind of man, you know? It's like, just like there was a lot of idol worshippers back in the day, there will right now, even to this day, there's a lot of subject worshippers. People who feel that language holds the truth more than anything in the outer realms. You know? That's when your inner realms can be manipulated. You know what it is? It's like there's this saying that says if they make you ask the wrong question, they don't have to worry about your answers. You know, and if the person is just asking questions about their sensory perception, then they don't wonder about what is beyond their sensory perception, you know. It's as if it's the domain of scope that your attention chooses to pilot in the conscious waking state. So all that I'm saying, guys, is that in any moment we can judge anything, you know, literally, and it's infinite. A person can endlessly judge a person till the end of time. Do you know? It's just like meditation, where your attention goes on a single point, and as your attention is on that single point, thoughts begin to arise. And then these thoughts have a speed, and the moment you can witness your own mind like a film, you can watch your mind like a film, and the watcher of it is, as the Vedas says, the seer of the seen is unseen. It's as if invisible space is experiencing a visible body. By the way, thank you to everyone who engaged the chat section. Okay, so let me attempt to land this plane. our minds expressed through language and image. Our bodies are expressed through the experience of existence directly. So what that means is our minds have meaning, our bodies don't. Our bodies don't mean a single thing because atoms don't have any purpose in the space-time continuum aside from their geometry. So you can say the elemental reality, the secular society's metaphysics will just be how geometry accesses new dimensions. So what I'm trying to say is that our body has no opinion on itself. Our mind, which is noticing the body and noticing itself also spaciously outside of the body, the mind is using physics and let's say abstracto-physics. What I mean by that is like an internal object. That means like the body is just a physical, an external object. The mind has access to how the internal object, how the attitude, the psychology of the person influences their physiology. So for if anybody is considering they have a mind, your mind is most likely a simulation inside a story, and that's where the meaning of life comes from. So how you creatively express the character in the story of the world that you perceive is like becomes your personality. So I would say there's one view that a personality is a specific character trait. Then there's another view where a person's personality is just a response of invisible space with a visible matter, you know. So the mind, based on language, is where the meaning. So language is what's the container of human meaning. All that the human being can do, to be honest, in a very simple manner of speech, if I can say it, is use what it has to create something before the curtains are pulled, before we exit. So everybody listening to me right now, we are in the room of the conscious waking state, where a singular outer realms provides an opportunity of like 8 billion inner realms to remodify it. And so we can remodify existence experientially in an organized collective way, as if the honor of the human species, it's as if the human species not only perceived itself as the greatest kingdom of intelligence in the universal sector, but we also saw that our kingdoms were in the clouds, you know. There will come that era, you know, in my inner realms, I have experienced probabilities of what the first day would look like where sky cities begin lifting up into there. You know, I've predicted that 600 years from now. And so you know how it looks like? It looks like a giant shadow is being cast on the earth. You know? And it would be one of the most incredible moments, you know? It's as if all the animal species are like, no way. Human beings went and lived in three-dimensional space, and so the Earth became... oh man, this is going into the idea of civilization 2.0. Okay, so in the chat section, there's a question, I think. So Justin says, in context, the 25% of human population having nostalgia for the future. We have a nostalgia for the future because our ancestors shifted into the future. The essence of their or our memory was teleported, pruned from the past into the void once we forget who we are as beings. Okay. Here's the way I'm approaching it. The reason I say that here's the attitude that allows for the concept of a future self to have any sort of relationship with the present self. Okay, so the concept of future can be entered into differently, I could say. But I would say here's the idea. If in the future right now we're individuals, right? One individual mind, one individual body. Let's say in the future, way in the future, I'm predicting 3,600 years from now, the species, even more than 4, I don't know if it was 4,600. Anyways, but anyways, in the future, after, at least in my model of the future, the future self is an ocean. The future self is beyond time. The future self has surpassed. That future advanced civilization has surpassed the invisible. The future advanced civilization has become timeless. Because it can be timeless, it can be anywhere in time. And so it's as if the recognition of the singular, of the collective future self, is the individual's enlightenment now. Right? And even though it is true, we can say, hey, Mr. Within, the past and future are just in the present. There's only the present. What are you talking about, a future? But I'll tell you, no. The present is moving. The present is intelligently moving, and it's unknown at first, to be honest. So what I'm trying to say is, if here, I'll say I have a unique idiosyncrasy in my inner realms where I don't perceive spirit guides, I don't perceive angels and demons, I don't perceive extraterrestrials or anything. I perceive that behind the veil of my sensory perception is my future self. That means I'm that person who you would say who thinks who is like very playfully considering that if there was the concept of a spirit guide, it is my own future self. That's the way it knows how to guide, because it has lived already. So it's the same idea with the notion of God, as if everybody has a soul, then your soul is God, right? So if your soul is God, it's as if there is no individual, because truth is all individuals at once. And so that is really a snapshot of the idea of the advanced civilization. That's the paradise on earth. It's not an equality through breaking things down all to the same level, but I would say it's an equality of realizing the space of the freedom of the mind and the dynamic state of psychology. So I would say that, oh my God, this song is like... What can I say? Either we're the small and the big, or the big and the small, or beyond the concept of the macro and the micro, the world turns non-ideologically, You see, guys, metaphysics is a domain where the word meta means after. That means anybody who's interested in physics, you cannot ignore a changing world. The concept of a changing world is universal. All individual human archetypes find themselves in a changing world. Now, the idea is, as we are living as an actor in this film of elemental life, what if in the middle of a theater performance, the actor on stage that was for eons, for endless samsaric cycles of karma and manifestation and reincarnation, just appearing as a sort of archetype, As if, let's say, an inventor, and you as an inventor archetype in endless civilizations. Anytime the civilization gets to an inventive state, your archetype appears into the realm. You know. You see, the unthinkable is that nothing is not emptiness. The era of the I would say neo-philosophy has begun. The world trapped itself in ignorance just to realize it had in some sense built like a slingshot the greatest potential to march towards the unknown evolution. In some manner, I would say, if our species is smart, we would recycle our ignorance into clarity. We would use our suffering to innovate. That means the past is like just all that the past can do is show you who you were. But the future can show you who you can be. That is the power of the future. That means from a designer's mentality or from an inventor's mentality, the future is the greatest invention of man. And that's where all the great inventions are. Nikola Tesla has this quote. I'm going to read it for the audience. And Nikola Tesla was kind of like an introverted genius, which I think most geniuses, they seek solitude to have space of mind. But Nikola Tesla says, let the future tell the truth and evaluate each one. At least this quote is ascribed to Nikola Tesla. It says, let the future tell the truth and evaluate each one according to his work and accomplishments. The present is theirs. The future for which I have really worked is mine. What Nikola Tesla meant is that Nikola Tesla was living for the future humanity, but for example, Edison was living for the present humanity when he was in competition with Tesla and would electrocute elephants in public. That shit was next level. I have this theory that when Alexander Graham Bell made the phone, and when the first two human beings were talking on the phone, that was equivalent to an alien technology for the psychology of man. The teleportation of sound. We have mastered sound teleportation, we've mastered image teleportation, but we haven't mastered life teleportation, And the only way life can teleport, at least, is in your inner realms changing. And it's kind of, believe it or not, a person can have any belief, but life goes on. That means that tomorrow when you wake up, you're not even the same self as yesterday to hold the belief in the same way. So the species, an advanced civilization, requires the members of civilization to prepare for the probabilities of the future. The smartest strategy we've had is to work together as a species, And the second smartest strategy we've had is, in some sense, finding a context where it's win-win. Right? That means if 8 billion people lived win-win, there would be no losers, And literally there is no concept of in the outer realms, sure, that you could have a marathon and, somebody's going to end up last in the marathon. But or you could say you release a bunch of rats and, one of them wins the rat race, and gets the cheese, or gets to the cheese first. But I would say, imagine all the rats walk together to the cheese, That means it's just resource allocation in accordance to how human psychology values reality. I'll be honest, a very interesting and geometrical way a person can see any human being. Sometimes when I walk outside and I see people, in some sense I'm seeing a point in three-dimensional space, and based on their attitude, both their body language and their eyes, a person's eyes reveal so much, guys. You won't believe. I would say reading eyes is an art. Like, to that degree, it can be, It's as if we are like this next level multidimensional kung fu master. It's like the soul is the next level kung fu master. It has these different art forms, and it's like multidimensional art forms. One art form, physiological survival. One art form, psychological evolution. One other art form, witnessing the field as it takes a course. And that means, I'm telling you, we have been playing as just this, imagine a soccer game. We've thought of our attention has been just limited to the player in the game. But your attention can be through the eyes of the opponent, it can be through the eyes of the coach, it can be through the eyes of just the audience members, it can be through the eyes of the referee, it can be through the eyes of, do you know what I mean? There's an incredible short film, guys, which I'm trying to remember its name. Let me see if I can find it. This short film is, to me, a masterpiece. But I'll show it to you. I think it was called... Yeah, the short film is called Liminal, guys. I'm gonna write it in the chat section. People should look this short film up. In this short film, it talks about teleportation and how the soul of the person is not being teleported, as if even if we are managed to create a technology that the body can teleport, it could be that it becomes a sort of soulless personality that is teleported. The actuality is actually somewhere else, as if even if we made teleportation technology, because we're a multidimensional being, we can't fully teleport all our dimensions. Incredible short film. I would tell you, this is one of those short films that it should find itself at the international stage. Hopefully my talks contribute to that. I want to go into a quote tunnel, guys, on just the concept of understanding. And a quote tunnel, for those who are new, is just a part of this episode where I try to see how I consider all of knowledge to just be how human beings looked at the world so far. So in these quotes, you can see different human beings and how their inner realms engage the world, at least to some degree. Immanuel Kant says all our knowledge begins with the senses, proceeds then to the understanding, and ends with reason. There's nothing higher than reason. And by reason, he means consciousness. Because in order to have reason or implement reason, you have to be conscious of a world. There has to be something there to be able to be reasonable. Tony Robbins says to effectively communicate, we must realize that we're all different in the way we perceive the world. And use this understanding as a guide to our communication with others. Upton Sinclair says it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it. Mina Antrim says a beautiful woman delights the eye, a wise woman the understanding, a pure one the soul. Clifford Stahl says data is not information. Information is not knowledge. Knowledge is not understanding. Understanding is not wisdom. You know, I would say understanding, guys, just a side note, is when you connect knowledge directly to your experience, to your first experiential level of the simplest ways reality is kept, you know. Rollo May says communication leads to community, that is, to understanding, intimacy, and mutual valuing. Tony Robbins says, did I read this? Yeah, I read this. Linda Thompson says, our uniqueness, our individuality, and our life experience molds us into fascinating beings. I hope we can embrace that. I pray we may all challenge ourselves to delve into the deepest resources of our hearts to cultivate an atmosphere of understanding, acceptance, tolerance, and compassion. We're all in this life together. Yeah, guys, I'll just say something, an interesting idea. You see, the future is not a utopia or a dystopia. It's not when I say an advanced civilization, it's not gonna be, it's gonna be the literally great questions being the leaders of human progress. Great universal questions. And when the universal question is there, that means it's like, regardless of how much we accept the world in a certain way, it's a changing realm. Literally, it's I would say to the individual, this world is I've termed it as the language wars. It's a battlefield ideologically. That means our bodies are living like civilized people, but when it comes to what the human being is, you know, to what the human being can be, or how the human being is integrating into society as an individual that has just been born out of nowhere into the world, you know. The future is beyond belief and disbelief, because it is conscious momentum. It's as if it's like we united not in our ideological agreement, but in the speed that we were all running towards the future. Because what it means is the future, you're like, we can't go to the future. We experience the moment to moment, you know. But what we can do is probabilize. We can see in our realms ways that things can happen differently. You know, there's this story ascribed to Edison where his mother was giving birth to his younger brother in like some, you know, some part of the house at night. And what Edison does is he goes and finds all the mirrors in the house and comes and puts them behind the candles where his mother is giving birth, you know, to kind of expand, you know, the projection of light in the eyes. There is so many ways human psychology has moved on this earth that what can we even judge? Based on where? Where do we draw the lines of the extremes of a spectrum, you know, or, you know, like the most simplest dimension or the most complex, you know? That means in some sense to declare something as right and wrong, it has to be only in accordance to the result in the physical. In the inner realms, how can we say thoughts can be right or wrong? Let's say somebody watches a movie, and in the action movie, the person has a machine gun and like is like an action movie, you know? Like, let's say Rambo or something, you know? Let's say a person sees that film, right? So when the person sees that film, what is happening to the psychology? They are not Rambo, but they are experiencing that archetype. Or let's say a boxer movie, right? The boxer punches the other boxer in the face, and so can we say like if the whole audience punched the boxer in the face? You see, but we would see in the same way that image would echo in the human psychology, and then is the inner realms guilty or not, right? Can the inner realm sin, right? So we see, no, in the domain of abstraction, there is no good and bad. It's just, you know, imagination can go anywhere, you know. But when it's in the outer realms where we are a result-oriented species, then the concept of right and wrong comes in. You know, the only reason there's right and wrong, and the only reason there's laws in the realm, so many people want to break law, but I will tell you, we have to fix it. Because law was like an evolutionary collective advancement of an abstract agreement of how the world can move. Law is like an ideological blueprint to society. It's the design of the engine's possibility. And so the eyes of man, that means if a person can see something and close their eyes and visualize that thing or remember that thing, it's like, where are they seeing their imagination? You know, I think I've dedicated episodes, but I'm probably going to dedicate an episode to like, where is imagination right now? That means my sound, the sounds that I make are in the outer realm. My physical body is in the outer realm. But when the sounds that I make enter the ears of the listener, it's as if, where is that image? You know, where is the inner film taking place? And you will notice it is taking place in space, which is not a location. That means the mind doesn't have a container, but the body does. And the container of physiological survival is really the laws of nature and how man understands them and acts in accordance to them. So in the outer realms, you are kind of, even though I don't like using this archetype of student teacher, but I will tell you, it's like in the outer realms, you got to be a student of the universe. In the inner realms, you are the pilot moving it. That means, I will tell you, not all children born on this planet realize they have free will. I would say the psychology of the child is too busy trying to fit into a changing world, not realizing because it's changing, you can be a creative element in it, you know. That means sometimes I will tell the listeners, a lot of my inspiration comes from looking at our ancestry, from studying history, and being like, no way, so many things haven't been done yet at all. You know, that means in every field, anybody doing anything. Let's say you're, for example, a chef, you know, and then it's as if every day you're using the same methods, but then you wonder, okay, what's a better method? What's a better method? And it's as if, like, whether the person was like a martial artist practicing in the forest or a chef cooking, you know, it would be equivalent to the art form's evolution. It's kind of like how Ludwig von Beethoven, this genius musician, he says, don't just practice your art, but force your way into its secrets, for it and knowledge can raise man to the divine. That means if you stay true to your nature, it's not that miracles happen. Most likely your novelty will be the miracle for civilization. You know? And it's as if, for how long? That means, what are the options, right? We were like, again, I go back to, in my mind, I go to this picture where I'm like, okay, animals that were four-limbed, like anybody can put their palms on the ground and totally see there is an animalistic evolutionary dimension. So we were on four, you know, four limbs. And you know, even though we as a biological creature are standing up, this is a very odd comment to say, but I'm saying it in the context of a scientific realism, that it's as if even though we're standing up right now as human beings, our for example, genital anatomy is designed for a four-limb structure. Do you know? That means one can say that the evolutionary let's say the evolutionary ape stood up too soon. Right? So what was it? It was a four-limbed creature, just completely dependent. That means the imagination of animals is their ecosystem. It's just the human being that has access to a free will-based imagination sphere. You know? So we stood on two legs, we named ourselves, and then we dressed ourselves, do you know? Then we dressed our mind in ideologies and beliefs, and then we walk in civilization as an individual modern human being. Do you know? But if you think about it, the options based on how we take advantage of our modern existential opportunity will suggest, if we ever descend, if we ever get to a point where we would want to go become like the animals in nature? That means, do we want to Tarzan it out as a species, or do or do we want to kind of, Star Trek it out? Right? I am more fascinated by how the future can walk, rather than how the present had walked. That's old news. The past is like, the past, anything related to a person's past. Let's say they suddenly see something, they get emotional, and they remember some moment in their past, and they completely zone out of the present. The person should, anytime with their past appears, just acknowledge it quickly. Like, I will tell you, in my inner realms, I don't perceive a face to the unknown, to be honest, because it doesn't need to have a face. It's like, if it has a face, it's actually not unknown anymore. It's just that there is a supremacy beyond thought, and the human being's relationship with it is in some sense of an integrative dissolution. That means we're dissolving and at the same time remembering what we have always been. That means it's pretty much what all gurus, enlightened gurus, have been shouting at just the world is like, wake up, and the disciples were like, wake up from what? And then the guru shouts, wake up from yourself, from how you have locked your attention into a certain self, into a certain modality. In the inner realms, you can have a ridiculous freedom, That means, I will tell you, if these talks of mine are interesting, I think the only reason they should be interesting is because of the space where I move in. The world is just an infinite symbol archive, geometrical archive. Literally everything is geometry. And it's only man who, through the emotions, can step out of just a pure predestined structuralism. That means if the scientific method, let me be discreet here, if the scientific method attempts to, has this sort of mental context that the world has a structure and we're understanding the secrets of the structure, that's predestiny. That's the concept of predestination. Structuralism is another way of saying the world has already been shaped, and we are trying to understand its shape. It's a false argument. The shape is changing. The world is not the same world that it was before we were here. The conscious life realizes to become conscious of the collective unconscious is the ultimate psychological aim. That means, let's say you're a person who you think the purpose of life is just love, and let's say great. And let's say you achieve the greatest love every day of your life, you're in blissed out, Satchit Ananda state of love. Divine union, just everything is just perfect, right? Then you would ask, what after? What is the meta love? And the meta love is the actualization of that bliss. That means it's like the logos is like, oh, you noticed I'm here, great, now run into your world. There's a Sufi story, and I'll read one last thing, guys. To finish off the code tunnel before I share the story. Michael J. Fox says, acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means understanding that something is what it is and that there's got to be a way through it. Alright. Anyways, guys, I'm going to share with you a story that I think it should have a value to all the advanced communicators and the treasure revealers and all those human beings who have been born or will be born to serve the mind of an advanced civilization. This story is from, you can say realistically, like 1,000 years ago. And it's these three dervishes, and the dervish is you can say a Sufi mystic. So three Sufi mystic friends are walking at the edge of their town, and one of them turns to the other two and he's like, hey guys, Have you noticed this random wall appeared, and at the edge of their town, this giant wall, this giant stone wall that they can't even see the top of, and so they suddenly, and all three of them are like, yeah, this giant stone wall appeared out of nowhere, and so they're walking and they see this ladder. One of the friends, the first friend sees the ladder and says, guys, I'm climbing. We got to figure out what's behind this wall. And he goes up the wall, and the other two, and this is a very key detail in the story, guys. The first person who goes up the wall, the other two friends hold the ladder for him. Both of them, each one side of the ladder. The first friend goes above the wall, and as the story progresses, the first friend sees that on the other side of the wall is paradise, a heavenly dimension. And the first friend doesn't say a single thing and jumps quickly on the other side of the wall. The second friend and the third friend who have held the ladder are like, before they can even say, what do you see, the friend has jumped. So the second friend's like, I gotta go and check it out. Another key detail, the third friend is alone holding the ladder, and so the second friend is climbing it, you know. The second friend goes to the top, and again the overwhelmment of the paradise, let's say the dimension of paradise, hits him, right? So he sees the garden of paradise on the other side of the wall, and before he jumps, he's like, I gotta tell the third friend. And this is a key detail. The second friend from the wall, the second dervish, looks at the first dervish and says, hey man, the garden of paradise is here. The first person jumped in, I'm jumping too. And so the second person jumps. The third friend is now alone. There is no one to hold the ladder, and if he is to climb this giant ladder, he just has to do it with the faith that it's not gonna fall. And so the third friend dares, and he starts climbing the ladder, and the whole time he's like, ladder, don't fall, don't you dare fall. And so he climbs the ladder and gets to the top. When he gets to the top, his eyes touch infinity. His eyes see heaven, and in that moment his conscience and every archetypal inner voice in his memory just shouts at him, jump, go, your lifetime is about to finish, go, jump into the garden of paradise. And so it's as if the whole inner realms are saying, go, 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 fulfill the complete this dualistic distinction of the existential possibility, And so the third friend says, wow, the garden of paradise is here. And he turns around and starts climbing down the ladder, saying to himself, the world should know. That means if civilization can advance, it should be collectivized. And so we were hunter-gatherers of the outer realms, and now has come an era of global cyberspace communication. Like, that's a ridiculous advantage, And so now the whole species has to, in some sense, poetically, as Marshall McLuhan and Buckminster Fuller says, we are all crew members of Spaceship Earth, and the first task is, in some sense, organize and clean the spaceship. Organize all systems, both in the inner realms and outer realms. That means it's as if in the future educational system, two types of explorers are going to emerge. The explorers that are in some sense caring for the outer realms, and the explorers that are caring for the inner realms. You can say the pilot, every generation has pilots, and the pilot in the plane of existence has, in some sense, what do you find? Flight attendants. Those flight attendants are the advanced communicators that are inside the plane of existence. So in some sense, for the first time, multidimensionality, a multidimensional perception shall attempt to keep the whole species alive. That means imagine somebody does something wrong and, the old traditional mind of civilization 1.0 says, oh my God, that's a goddamn sin right there. I spotted a sin. Even a mathematician is like, yeah, I agree, I'm seeing a sin too, when a theologian sins, in the inner realms, the idea of hell comes, they go to hell. When a mathematician sins, calculators are invented. The future. Imagine somebody sins, and in the future there's a council of all perceptions. Imagine an advanced communication council. And so the advanced communications council, that means in the future what's going to happen probably is that when somebody does something anti-collective survivalism, in the future there's not going to be physical punishment. There's going to be an endless, literally endless therapy. How would I say it? Imagine the social justice system caring about the mind of the individual updating rather than the mind of the individual not having an opportunity to exist in civilization. Right? So it would be as if the sort of it would be as if the mind requires not a correction but an alignment to the values of civilization. Right? You can say it's like there's this global thing happening we're calling civilization. All the infrastructure that has been initiated by the human mind into the outer realms. And so I don't know how to say it, but it's as if for the first time we got to accept that we don't know what the mind is, and because we don't know what the mind is unknown. So if we judge a person's mind, we're judging the unknown. So rather than judging the unknown, we in some sense put the unknown in a situation where it has access to endless information. That means in the future, the criminal justice system is going to be cyberspace pods. That means is like the person commits a crime and then they go into this pod where their biological body is preserved and their mind is put into a cyberspace simulation. And in that cyber simulation, they have to understand the wrong that they have done. Do you know? This would be a sort of how the future foreshadowed the past. Example. So a species requires to be like the third friend. That's the advanced communicator. We have to, in order to build an advanced civilization in all dimensions of human intelligence, there has to be an advanced initiation. That means it's as if the advanced communicators, they don't care about the clothing people wear. They don't care about the ideological clothing their minds wear. They care about what their mind does in civilization. The actual outer realm influence. And so we have moved to an era of living as a mind moving a body rather than a body just being moved by the world into the behavior of its mind. That means sometimes when I look at animals, I also feel their subconsciousness is artificial. That means the animal knows nothing else outside of its just sensory perception of its environment. But the human being takes the senses and reformulates them to a point where, in a non-physical way, the theoretical physics was imagining in what else the physics, in what other context the physics could have meaning. Right? So we're using a non-physical, intelligent way of how energy is being us. Or like I don't know how to say it, like, okay, so right now, from the most scientific thing we can say is that energy is existing as attention, right? Honestly, this is the difference between, this is like two crossroads of psychology and philosophy, where we're like, the experience existed, or the existence is being experienced. As if attention exists, that means matter is in consciousness, or consciousness is in matter. Two models, really. If matter is in consciousness, the world is not a physical phenomenon. That means we have never had the concept of a physical object, in order to even draw the objective outline. That means we are living in a civilization where we're saying, all right, this is a cup, and we call it the subject, the name of, let's say, like it's an object, just an object that is nameless. We create the concept of the cup, which is the letter CUP, and the letters CUP link with this object. So anytime we see something shaped like this, we're like, yeah, pass me the cup, you know? So it's a sort of linking of sound with symbolism in the inner realms with physical mass of the object in the outer realms. Now, I'm saying that we could have called this object anything. Rather than a cup, we could have called it a puck. You know, we could have just changed the letters at the end and the beginning. You know, but we called it a cup, and we accepted that. And so when we go to wonder about our own psychology, that's what you find. Anytime you zoom in on any sort of life event, you will see that it was a decision. It was a response to the axiology of that moment. That means it's like when you think about what you did in the past, the decision you made was based on the value system you had in that moment, you know? That means there could be this complete, you know, like atheists in the future could suddenly shout at people, there's no such thing as the past. The past is equivalent to, you know, the unrealness of imagination, you know. And that's when the multidimensionalists of the realm have to defend the concept of time. You know? Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. This was a long episode. I guess as a final statement, just as answer to the question, are words meaningful and letters meaningless? The answer is yes, because letters are just art, just ink on a page, on an empty page, and that ink on the page has a separative, like there had to be a mathematical awareness, you know, an arithmetic, an awareness to numerology before there could be an awareness to, you know, literal English speech, you know. So I'm telling you that we had to have the concept of separate words before, like like the space between every word when we read a sentence. That means we have to have a mathematical awareness of the concept that it's not all one thing. Let us communicate what is necessary. Let us communicate just so that the future generations can look back at how we live now and be like, wow, our ancestors really aimed for the future. Now it's our turn, you know. That means that the way we live now will suggest if the future self of the species, what kind of memories it will have. If we live gracefully and intelligently, we will realize that there is so much of the mind unexplored, you know, and a person can just say the purpose of life, let's say, is just one physical activity, but I will tell you it is in some sense an art, you know. The poet Rumi has two statements that are very profound. He says, be living poetry, and he says, wherever you are, be the soul of that moment. And the soul of the moment is not the moment, it's the mover of the moment. So the presence beyond personality is how the conditional is inside the unconditional, the known is inside the unknown, our eyes are the unknown. There's nothing to fear. But there's everything to understand. Anyways, thanks for listening, guys. I hope this episode was helpful. Namaste. Rise, mankind, rise.